Welcome, dear friends, to part two of the masterclass. Thank you for joining me for part two. Let's first take a quick look at what we discussed or the first shift that we spoke about in the first part of the masterclass. So, in shift number one, we said that you need an accountability amplifier strategy that proves that you have the power to own up to your shortcomings and to understand her perspective. It has to add so much value up front that your wife instantly knows that you are the person who understands her better than anyone else in the world. You need a communication that instantly turns your wife from the mode of accusation and judgment to understanding and empathy. That's what shift number one is all about. Let's look at shift number two. Shift number two of the magic reignition system is about soulful communication. Yeah, so we are talking about this as a journey, not that you walk alone, but with your partner, with your wife. So, what is this shift number two? Soulful communication. It's first of all, it's about joint goals. And why joint goals and soulful communication? Because everyone has goals in life, and the only way you can come up and achieve those goals is by actually articulating the deepest thoughts in your mind with your partner. So you need to recruit your wife in this soulful communication process. It's not something that you do for yourself, but it's something that you do because both you and your wife will immensely benefit from this particular activity. Let's see what this shift two is all about. So the problem with your goal, by your goal I mean you, the audience right now, versus our goal, is that you have goals which do not make sense to us, to her. She complains about the fact that you do not understand and empathize with her. So what she's actually telling you is that she also has goals that you are not able to understand. In fact, you do not even notice when she does something nice. You do not understand why she places so much importance on some things. And you may be thinking as trivial and saying, these are small things. Why is she placing so much importance on that? Why does she want me to say certain things? So these are typical problems that any couple would probably have. The alternative is you want her to understand how important your goals are for you and for the family. You want her to know that that she respects that you respect her perspective on matters of importance. So that's mutual, right? So she knows how important your goals are. You also respect her. You notice and appreciate things about her and her efforts. And both of you have an understanding of what is important for the other and know how to approach it. Wow, that sounds wonderful. That's the alternative that you want. So, what is this shift to that I'm talking about? There are several ways in which the shift to can happen, but in the limited time we have, let me quickly talk about something I call as the vision journal. But before that, there are three ways to build trust and openness in communication. And they are number one, you learn to say things, the right things to say and say it often enough. So there's a lot of people who do this. So they're saying things because they've learned the trick. Okay. Maybe they don't really mean it, but they're saying it because they know the trick. That's one way to earn trust. Second, you have a schedule to do things regularly to show how you care. So you don't just say, but you also have on certain days bouquets of flowers, chocolates, a movie date, a dinner date, a candlelight dinner, etc. That's there in your schedule, and you kind of do those things and show that you care. Yeah, that's a nice way to build trust. Finally, the third way is you understand each other so completely that you never have to put on a single act. The key word here is put on and act. So you don't put on an act. you are just in sync with each other and you are able to communicate wholeheartedly with each other. So these are three ways in which you can kind of build trust in the relationship. So let's look at what saying the right thing means. So the consequence of if you just say the right things is that, she could say, you say you care, but you leave me alone to cry. Now that's powerful. Just saying doesn't mean you're doing those things, right? But you might be doing the right thing. So, like I said earlier, you have a schedule, you have calendar alerts. Nowadays, technology is there, so you have Google calendars, etc., which tells you, hey, these are the days for bouquets, gifts, dates, whatever, whatever. All the nice things that a couple do. And finally, and this picture kind of sums it up that there is there is no act, no kind of reminder, nothing that you're doing just so that the other person feels nice. You're doing it because you understand each other completely and you know that that is the thing that needs to be done. And you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because the other person wants you to do it. And that's complete understanding. Yeah. So how do you and I'm sure I can almost hear all of you say that how nice it would be to be in the third kind of understanding and third kind of empathy with each other where you understand each other completely. Let's see how it's done. Okay. So there are several ways of doing it, and one of them is the vision journal that I would like to talk about right now. So here's how it's done. Step one of a vision journal is you get inspiration, which could be you go together to a nice place and spend time saying we are not doing anything but working with each other to chart out how our life, how our dream life, ideal life has to be. That's the vision journal exercise. Next, you follow a system. So we have some wonderful systems which help you put together a fantastic vision journal. One of the ways, for example, is you can use pictures instead of numbers, and that's a wonderful activity that you can do in order to put this vision journal together. Fourth, and this is highly recommended, so when you put a goal together, share it. And when you share it and you put it out there, you're committing yourself even more to kind of make it happen. So we say share the vision journal with dear ones. And finally, you have a vision, now you need a plan. So how do you get together to make a plan? A wonderful system, an extremely powerful system to make sure you understand each other so completely that this whole pretense of having to say things, having to do things all falls away and you just flow with each other. So here's a case study. This is Rajiv. He was the admin head of an oil and gas company working long hours, completely committed to his job. Wife used to work from home doing Vastu consulting. They had a very mundane and repetitive life. 22 years after marriage, they had developed a certain distance with nothing really to look forward to other than their children. Okay, so this happens where the only reason you're together is because of children, and that's not a nice place to be, and that's where Rajiv and his wife were. So, in Rajiv's case, the vision journal was the turning point in his relationship. With shared goals and a clear path, Rajiv and his wife were so excited about life, not only then, but they had a plan even after their children didn't need them so much. And let's say the children had moved away from home, they still had a life to look forward to. And that's the kind of complete understanding that we talk about in doing this. So let's understand where you are now. If you're struggling, you hardly ever go out on vacations outside the format. Weekends are spent watching TV or meeting your own friends. You're happier not to have to discuss plans, that's really boring. If you're striving, then you do discuss things that you can do together, but hardly agree on what. You seem to be doing the same things again and again each week. But if you're flowing and you're successful, you're both excited about spending time with each other. There's a clear plan to look forward to. Your vacations are exciting and memorable, and you just basically sync together, you click together. Yeah. So, well, two ways, the old way or the new way. Which one do you choose? You can continue your mundane existence. After all, just being there is also good enough. So I have highlighted being there and good enough. So good enough is not great, right? So we are talking about just being good enough. If you do plan on doing something together, you struggle to agree on what it is. End up doing the same things again and again, like watching a movie, going to a restaurant, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing that you end up doing. Or you can have a vision journal. You're both aware and in harmony with each other's goals and desires. You have a clear roadmap of how you want to get there, how it and what it'll take. You partner each other to get your goals. That's really the new way that I'm talking about. Bottom line, you need a vision journal to understand each other's desires and goals. Has to be exciting so that you lead your life wanting to spend each day joyfully. You'll never be wondering what you want from life. You'll encounter some by chance, but everything else, you really have a plan. Let's look at shift three. And this is more about prioritization. That's why I call it first things first, the what before the how. So it's about putting the big stones first. Yeah. So without the what, the how is not relevant. So we definitely need to prioritize. Three ways to prioritize. You make a list of important events you believe are important and you schedule them. You identify things that you really constitute contribution and do them regularly. You work with your wife to arrive at things that are really important for both of you and schedule and execute it together. So let's see what is the first thing? Believing what is important. So when you start believing what is important, not really understanding it. Okay, so this is a great picture which tells you the story that this particular gentleman considered one of the funniest people in Earth with some of the most amazing movies. Robin Williams committed suicide. So all it takes is a beautiful fake smile to hide an injured soul, and they will never notice how broken you are. So stop believing because believing actually means not knowing. You end up believing what you do not know. I think before you believe, it's important to confess and say, I do not know, because it's only when you say, I don't know, does the possibility of knowing arise, right? Being there and contributing. Nice, it's wonderful. So you're doing the things, you're around, you're doing things with family, you're doing some nice thing, and that's really, really wonderful. That's one thing. Finally, it's not just about the doing things that turn up because that is still in a mode where you are reacting. Like I said earlier, it's your reptilian brain which helps you react. It's your mammalian and human brain that helps you to plan and respond. And the wonderful way of going through life is by having these joint plans for life. And you prioritize things that are really important by having plans and not merely reacting to situations. So here's how it is done. What is this joint plan that I'm talking about? Uh, there is a concept, you could probably Google it and see, called 168 hours. So you can imagine 168 hours is nothing but the number of hours there are in a week. And a week is a great way to make a plan as far as business is concerned. Uh, Similarly, there are some wonderful ways that you can plan for life together. And 168 hours obviously doesn't work when you're making a plan with your wife. But these joint plans, to have a visual plan as well as the technology, as well as a score that keeps coming as to how you are against your plan. Fundamentals in business, and in a very sweet way, they can be adapted to the home situation without it feeling like, oh, this is one more business that's happening at home. There are some wonderful ways that you can put together a joint plan, use suitable technology, come up with some great scores, and know that you are working together as a couple. You have prioritized what are the most important things, and you are actually creating that wonderful life together that you've always dreamt of. So, this is Sudhanshu. He's an editor of one of the leading dailies of India. He came to us, with a broken relationship. He being an editor, he kept working ungodly hours, also handling calls when he was with family. So the distinction between personal time, professional time has simply vanished. So when Sudhanshu put the joint plan together, it was really exciting, not just for him, but also for his family, because for the first time they felt that he had a plan for them. And he and his wife knew what they wanted to achieve together. And they started measuring things. And what you measure gets focus and energy. And what gets focus and energy actually ends up getting done. So it was a wonderful story of Sudhanshu, of how he turned things around just by having a joint plan. And a joint plan obviously also means that his wife was very much part of the plan. And just having the joint plan, you know, absolutely mended the fractured relationship that he had, and all this in less than 30 days. Yeah, so joint plan is a great strategy to have. So, where are you now? If you're struggling, after the hours spent in work, even your family time is riddled with calls related to work. You carry work home simply because you figure the hours there can also be put to use. If you're striving, then you probably realize that carrying work home is not such a great idea, but then everyone does it. Not doing it is difficult because you have to prove yourself to be a dedicated professional. However, if you're flowing, you are successful, then you have a clear plan for home as you do for work. Your colleagues and boss also respect the planning and maybe even emulate you. So, why should you be influenced by the fact that others take work home? Why shouldn't others get influenced by the fact that you are so well planned that you do not need to take work home? You're so efficient that the hours at work actually transform your life, and you're so efficient you need to take work home. And if you become this beacon and that others emulate, your personal time actually remains personal. So where are you, the old way or the new way? So you can continue to make excuses at home for your killing work schedule. After all, you're an important person. Your family sees you as important but unavailable. After all, you're in office even when you are with them. Or you have a plan for personal life just as much as you have a plan at work. You're both in on the plan and you make yourself available. When you plan to fail, sorry, when you fail to plan, you actually plan to fail. So, the bottom line, you need a schedule, you need a documented plan. It will not work without the documentation. The family will respect you for being important, but they will really love you only if you're available. The only way folks at work will fall in with your family commitments is if you have a plan. Now, this is important, So, the biggest excuse is all this sounds good, but you know what? At work, there are these sort of problems. So, if you have a plan, that can get sorted. Right. Now, let's talk about shift four. Uh, and this is about negotiating corners. And by negotiating corners, I mean responding strategically. So, what happens when you arrive at a speed bump? This is something that's inevitable, that will always happen in a relationship. You will have points of disagreements, points where you argue. So, when you arrive at a speed bump, do you have a strategy to disarm the debate unilaterally? So, what's the strategy? There are three ways to respond, when there is a situation. The first one is the blame game. This, I wouldn't even call it respond. This is probably react. So when something goes wrong, you say you are the one responsible for it, not me. Then there is the I surrender game. So the I surrender game is something a lot of husbands nowadays have mastered, where they say, I surrender. The moment it happens, yes, it was my fault, forgive me, just to end the argument. You know what? Women are smart. Your wives are smarter than you think. So they know when you're putting an act and saying, I surrender. They are not going to buy that act. The third way is you respond to the big picture. You really respond, and you're not talking about reacting here. You really respond to the big picture. So let's understand what this is. Okay. So the blame game, okay, I blame you is quite self-explanatory. I surrender. A lot of husbands do this, okay, strategic, show the white flag, and just somehow end the argument while all the time in your heart you're thinking, you know what, I am right, but I'll let her win. Well, not a great strategy because it shows, it shows. Let's talk about responding to the big picture. Okay, this is a great strategy to have. So, what does it actually mean? How it's done? Um, One of the strategic response is what I call as the camera paradigm. So what I want you to do is whenever uh, you are faced with a situation when there is a disagreement, immediately think of yourself as somebody in front of a camera whose picture is being taken. Is that the kind of picture you would love to be put up on Facebook or Instagram? If you do not want your friends and colleagues to have to look at that face of yours, you know something is wrong. Okay, so that's what I call as the camera paradigm. But more importantly, there are 5 steps to end any fight. And I think we are a bit short on time, so I'm not going into the details of the 5 steps. But it's important that you know what those 5 steps are in order to end a fight and respond strategically. So let's look at Prateek. Now, Prateek is a program manager in a software firm. He's gotten into the cycle of partying with colleagues and lying about it at home. The reason being, if he says I had gone for a party, at home his wife would get increasingly suspicious and unhappy. If he avoids partying, then his colleagues would think of him as a wet blanket, somebody who's not in sync with them. So the big picture response philosophy is something Pratik and I worked on, and Pratik imbibed it beautifully. He did not see it as a gimmick to put wool over his, wife's eyes. He used it to have a meaningful communication to deepen the trust in the relationship. So he spoke about the environment. He spoke about how it is in a software firm. He spoke about what it means to be partying and why he feels that even the partying is important for his work. And he and his wife had a really, really meaningful communication and conversation and both jointly arrived at a way in which Pratik could handle situations, the number of times he could go for a party, and the number of times he could deal with situations differently. So, wonderful example of where Pratik did not have to compromise, did not have to pull wool over his wife's eyes, and actually had a meaningful conversation by which they could deepen their relationship. So, let's see where you are. If you're struggling, you fight frequently and get stuck in the I am right argument loop. There are times when you go into the silent treatment mode. You complain about this to your close friends. You let them know about, what's happening at home. You're striving, then you realize that these fights are no win and you simply give up. This ends the argument, but you're not exactly happy, nor is your wife, since it does look farcical. But if you're successful and in the flow, an argument is an opportunity to listen to the other person's view, becomes an event of introspection into the relationship, and it always results in clear actions and clear viewpoints for each other. So the old way is about you can continue to get into arguments and take the I am right stance, or you can employ the tactic of giving up quickly, as it is too tiresome to argue. It feels like a farce for both of you. Or an argument becomes an opportunity to introspect and understand how your partner feels. It becomes a template for future ways to deal with situations in creating a wonderful life. Yeah, so this kind of covers the shifts 2, 3, and 4 that I spoke about. In summary, shift number 4 talks about the fact that arguments are inevitable, but the outcomes are not. Can be the way of chipping away at the roots of your relationship, or it can be the manure that strengthens the tree. If you respond strategically, it can be the basis of a strong relationship and a wonderful life. Friends, this brings me to the end of part two of this masterclass. In part one, we looked at the shift number one. In part two, we have looked at three more shifts, and I hope you've seen real value in this. In part three of the video, I take you through the final shift on support structure that's needed to make these changes and kind of summarize the whole thing together and the way forward. I do hope to see you in part three of the video. Thanks for joining me for this masterclass. This is Arun Rao signing off. See you in part three. Cheers. Bye bye.